What do you make of someone like Eichmann, paper pushing bureaucrat, and the banality of evil?
Well, I talked about that a little bit obliquely, let's say in Rule 3 and Beyond Order. Do not hide things in the fog. It's like realization is generally an effortful process. Like you're alerted to your own wrongdoing by glimmerings of conscience, let's say, feelings of shame and doubt. But you have to unpack those to find out exactly what you're doing wrong. And that's really hard. It's effortful. And so you can just not do it. And the way you don't do it is you take refuge in your blind conformity. And that's part of that pluralistic ignorance. And I suppose that's one of the flaws of the argument that you laid out. It's like, yeah, people were pluralistically ignorant, but how much of that was turning a blind eye? And you can maintain a very high level of plausible ignorance by turning a blind eye. And in the ancient Egyptian story that I'm so enamored with, the story of Osiris and his degeneration. So he's the god of the state. Osiris degenerates because he turns a blind eye to the machinations of his evil brother. He could know, but he decides not to. And that's a moral sin in my estimation. And so out of the story that you told with regards to pluralistic ignorance, I would add a psychological component is, yeah, well, how much could have people known if they would have allowed themselves to investigate instead of refusing it? So, with Freud, you have the idea of repression. You know something uncomfortable and you suppress it, and it's there and you can rediscover it. But it's not exactly right, because what happens is that you have a hint that something's rotten in the state of Denmark, and that elicits an exploratory tendency and an avoidance tendency as well. And you can just leave it unpacked. And then the rot that you're detecting subliminally, let's say, accumulates around you. And if it accumulates enough, it turns into the dragon of chaos. It's like, and then you get the situation that you described. By the time that you can no longer turn a blind eye, the thing that you avoided is so monstrous that you cannot prevail against it. So I would still say, even if that entire explanatory story is correct, it misses the moral culpability element, which is, yeah, okay, just how much could have you known? And I have some sympathy for this. Believe me, I understand why people are blind to the horrors of malevolence, let's say, because malevolence, when confronted, is traumatizing. And you see that in the post-traumatic stress disorder literature. It's contact with malevolence that traumatizes people. The contact with someone who really, really wants to hurt them. And they're shocked by that can even exist. It's terrible, especially when you start looking into it. It undoes you, it unglues you, especially if you are a naive believer in the untrammeled goodness of human beings or even of existence. In any case, you turn a blind eye, and ancient stories warn about this all the time. You turn a blind eye, and then things go rotten under your sovereignty, and by the time you're awake, it's too late. And that isn't, you've abdicated your responsibility. And that happens bit by bit, right? That's the other thing about it that's so pernicious. It's like people ask me, for example, why I chose this bill in Canada to die as a hill to die on, let's say. And it's like,
Yeah.
well, you're going to say no. If you ever say no, you're going to say no to something trivial, because things that go astray bit by bit. And so there's virtually never a sliding point where everyone says, oh, no. It's like, well, this much more. Well, I'm uneasy, but I accept it. Well, then it's a little worse and you're a little lesser. And then it's this much more, And the probability that will happen is there all the time. And it's as moral citizens that who have a moral obligation to see what's in front of us, that we hold that at bay always. It's with our eyes open. That's why Horus in the Egyptian story is the eye. He's not thinking. It's not thought. It's attention. See. It's the willingness to turn your eyes to the phenomena and see what's there. And the Egyptians regarded that as part of what was redemptive. It's brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant. Conscious attention as the source of eternal redemption. Right. That's the human story. I mean, look at us. We're half visual cortex.
Yes.